Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, and in my hands I have this little grey, well yellow in this case, this little yellow box, the Nintendo Entertainment System, aka the NES, aka the NES, depends what region you're from really. Anyway, with regards to this system, it was hugely influential and absolutely hugely popular. If you know anything about this platform, you will be well aware of how bloody obsessed Americans used to be with it. It was absolutely hugely popular in Japan too, in the form of the Famicom, being a Japanese system and all. So, over the years there has been a great deal of hyperbole around the system. That has been a rolling ball of momentum that has got more and more out of control. People's nostalgic love for the platform continued to grow. So whilst we moved past the 8-bit days and went on to the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation, the Nintendo 64 and platforms like that, the 8-bit NES had somewhat of its first renaissance in the early 2000s. That was the time period when you'd had somewhat of a paradigm shift in gameplay. A lot of things had become 3D and moved on quite a lot. So when you had games like GTA 3 and stuff like that on the PlayStation 2, it was a far cry from the gaming experiences people were having in the 1980s. So a lot of people began to get somewhat nostalgic and pine for the games of the past. So many people started collecting retrospectively. This was the same time we saw the rise of the angry video game nerd on YouTube, which spawned many copycat channels as well. So you had YouTube, this huge platform where people were going on it and they were starting to watch content and basically reminisce about retro gaming experiences, and this led to somewhat of a boom and loads of people going out there and thinking, you know what, I want to collect retro games too. So they went to start buying games as well. So it just made the NES even more popular. However, this went on for many years, and the prices of NES games have been getting more and more out of control. However, personally, I feel that NES and its popularity is finally starting to die off somewhat, and that's the main point in which I am addressing in this video today. There are a number of factors I feel which are starting to influence this somewhat. And the first of those, I would say, is probably YouTube itself. Some people say there's less NES content made on the platform today simply due to the fact that so many videos have been made about the platform in the past. There's literally nothing left to say, which I personally would agree with somewhat, but personally I think it's more down to the algorithm changes itself the platform has gone through. Back in the day, most people like to produce short videos, maybe 5 to 10 minutes maximum, because really, if you're not some big professional production company, it's going to be hard to get someone to watch your videos for a long time, because people's attention spans are quite short unless you've got a huge production budget. Over time, as YouTube has grown, there are now a lot of large companies on YouTube who can output long videos with a decent budget. So these days it looks like YouTube has shifted somewhat and are attempting to compete with Netflix. So so a single person producing a video about the NES, in order to get a lot of exposure on it, you'd be better off making a long video on the system instead. So for people to get views with this new algorithm, many people resort to making news videos instead, because most videos are only popular on the platform for the first couple of days now. After the first couple of days, your videos will often get pushed right to the back of the queue and they won't appear in anyone's suggested feeds. So if you're making something about retro games, that's not current affairs, it's not really relevant. So your video is not going to get a lot of exposure if you're making it about the NES. That's why most people these days, gaming wise, will be making videos about things like Fortnite, the Nintendo Switch, the Atari VCS and stuff like that. Stuff what's current, stuff that's relevant. I think the first factor into why there is less NES content online now is because the algorithm doesn't get that sort of content pushed out as much, so that sort of content won't make as much money as it perhaps did back in the day. My next point kind of goes back to this news point as well. About 2 years ago, these new style channels were releasing ridiculous amounts of videos all about the Nintendo Entertainment System Mini or NES Classic Edition, whatever you want to call it. So they was all releasing loads of videos about this, and then the system sold out pretty quickly because Nintendo never reached their demand. Past this, people were still pumping out loads of videos about the system, not reaching the demand. So I think maybe people got a little bit sick about hearing about the system quite as much as that. It was a little bit much, wasn't it? So I reckon quite a few people probably tried out the NES over that period for the first time in a while, and once people got down to it, played a little bit of those 8-bit games, I reckon a lot of people probably were able to finally put down that pair of nostalgia goggles and realise that the NES perhaps is not quite as great as some people perhaps make it out to be. Also, going on from there, you may have noticed over the years, as YouTube has grown in popularity, as smartphones have become bigger, and as basically you've got more collectors in the market, the price of retro games has got more and more ridiculous. I think another factor that plays into this as well is the fact that the people who originally grew up with NESs back in the day got a little bit older and they got disposable income behind them. So that the older they got and the more money they had, the more they could afford to fork out on bloody common old NES games, couldn't they? However, I feel this generation of people's priorities may have shifted now somewhat. For example, many of these people who would have been in their early 20s, in the early noughties, maybe in their mid to late 30s by now. And many of these people in their mid to late 30s most likely have children of their own now. So rather than spending all their money on old retro games themselves, they're probably more likely to spend money supporting their family. It's just a more mature thing to do, isn't it? So if you're going to have retro games starting to go up in value these days, I would say you're more likely to be expecting it from the likes of the Nintendo GameCube, for example, as that is now the generation that currently has disposable income just to flush down the toilet because they haven't got any responsibility their bloody self yet. Also, in regards to the ridiculous prices of NES games, many collectors like myself who started in the early noughties aren't willing to pay the astronomical amount for games anyway. Like, why should we pay such a ridiculous premium on these games? Like, it's got to the point where if you're willing to spend, well, you're not willing to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on a game because it just make you feel like a bloody moron forking out such a large sum of money for something what's in such abundance. Like, if you go on eBay and look at most listings, you'll find pages and pages and pages of the same bloody game, but then you'll notice the issue is all of these sellers are trying to sell their products at buy now prices just because perhaps about 6 months ago one NES game sold for X amount, so now the greedy little buggers all expect that amount of money as well. So it's got to the point now where the market looks like it's starting to freeze up some bit because everything's just got so ridiculous and so out of hand. Going on going on Facebook buying and selling groups, I have noticed over time that a lot of sellers are starting to notice this issue they have at the moment as well. And a lot of their plans going forward is they literally just intend to sit on their products until other products come to the market that somewhat relate to their products, which will make other people consume their products. Like, for example, if we got a Super Mario Odyssey 2, maybe you'll suddenly get a load of morons who want to pay like £100 for Mario 2 and Mario 3 on the NES, for example. That sort of thing. So, as you can hear from my video, there appears to be quite a number of reasons why the NES finally appears to be falling out of favour over the last couple of years. It's actually quite strange to see this shift because the NES has been such a big part of YouTube over the years, especially with regards to retro gaming. Like if you went on YouTube years ago to look for like Master System content or PC Engine content, you wouldn't have found it in the same abundance in which you got NES content. There were so many creators whose whole entire channels seemed to just revolve around that platform. Quite ridiculous really. However, saying that, part of me does miss this content just a little bit. It's almost became nostalgia within nostalgia, if you know what I mean. Like getting nostalgic about videos, what was made about nostalgia. It's quite strange really, it's nostalgia inception. So, because there appears to be a lack of decent new NES videos, I've actually decided I'm going to do something. Most of the NES videos were made in the old days of YouTube, the days when creators made 5 to 10 minute videos, as I said. So for that reason, I vow to make a 60-minute in-depth video about the bloody platform, discussing whether or not it in fact is still relevant in 2018. I intend to make one of the most in-depth videos on the platform that has ever been published on the information superhighway. So, ladies and gentlemen, maybe it is time for the Top Hat Gaming Man to make the NES great again. Wouldn't that be nice, America, if I did that for you? Yes! So, let us know in the comment section whether or not you think the NES has started to fall slightly in relevance over the last couple of years. Cheerio!